Good morning and welcome to this special edition of ThaiPBS World with me, Thep Chayong and Kun Tulip, Naksompop Blauw, our brand new news presenter. Welcome to the program, Kun Tulip.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we're keeping you updated on the latest on the rally at Sanam Luang. And all we can say is that all went well and ended well without any untoward incidents.
As expected?
Not really. Not totally out of beyond expectations,
Okay.
but we feel relieved that things ended well and without any incidents that could lead to confrontation or violence. So as we can see now on the screen, this is what Sanam Luang looks like at the moment, Kun Tulip. So it was a stark difference from what we saw last night when thousands of people were occupying the ground.
There were people camping, dancing, there was staging, a lot of things last night, but right now it looks so calm.
That's right. So all the protesters dispersed shortly after, the protest leaders submitted a petition with the police meant to be forwarded to the Privy Council. So earlier, about an hour ago, the protesters marched from Sanam Luang toward the office of the Privy Council, which is just a short distance from the Sanam Luang. And the intention was to submit the so-called 10-point manifesto with representatives of the Privy Council. But of course, as we can see, that there was a heavy police presence blocking the protesters, so that the protesters could not get anywhere near where the office of the Privy Council is located.
Last night, the protest leaders said that there will be two surprises this morning.
Yes.
One of the things that people already anticipated, the brass, the plaque for Rasadon party. But the another thing that no one actually guessed what it is, but in the morning he actually revealed that they will change the destination from walking to the government house to be the office of Privy Council.
That's right. Because earlier the protesters had threatened to march to the government house to submit the petition, the 10-point demand. But they changed their mind last minute and then tried to march toward the office of the Privy Council. What you're seeing now is the moment that Kun Panatsaya, Kun Rung, one of the protest leaders, was negotiating with the Metropolitan Police, asking to see representatives of the President of the Privy Council to submit the 10-point demand. But of course, the police said that they could not possibly allow the protester to go anywhere near the place.
So she was reading out the demand in front of the Metropole chief, and after that she hands over the letters. Initially they said 3 letters to the Metropole, and hopefully that will get to the Privy Council.
So this is supposed to be the highlight of the whole rally, which began early yesterday morning. So finally the protesters made their voice heard, and they did what they promised to do, that is to demand a reform of the monarchy. Of course, it could in the views of some people, the whole thing could have come short of being the so-called super big surprise as promised by the protesters. So this is exactly how the whole thing ended today. But of course, that's not the end of the story yet, because the protesters said that, they have left behind their demands, and then they would come back again to ask for progress. And they have scheduled another major rally on October the 14th.
October the 1st, next month.
That's right.
So they give time to the officials a month
That's right.
to maybe negotiate, rethink, and come up with something.
Right. And after submitting the demand with the city police chief, the protesters headed back to Sanam Luang, and then they decided to end the rally, which has been going on for at least 23 hours now. All right. So everything went well and then ended peacefully, despite earlier fears that there could be confrontation and some violence. And now we have our reporter, Kun Kittipat Chun Sukjit, waiting to report on the letters from Sanam Luang. And we're waiting for a signal from him.
So our team have been on the ground since yesterday morning, and they have been working very hard to bring you the update. And I think it has been raining since the morning, early morning today.
All right.
Now Kun Kitipat is ready, so we will go to Kun Kitipat. Good morning.
Good morning, Kap Kun Tepchayong and Kun Tulip Kap. Right now I'm here at the Sanam Luang area. So right now the demonstration has been finished as the protest leader asked the protester to go back after the two big surprises events happened this morning. The first surprise that was happened this morning is the symbolic activity about the Kanat Ras plaque. Protesters mounted their version of a historic plaque at 6:40 a.m. in the morning, commemorating the Kanat Rat, or a group of soldiers and civilians who staged the 1932 Siamese Revolution on the grounds of Sanam Luang and renamed Sanam Rasadon. The brass plaque, which is 11.6 inches in diameter, bears the three fingers salute, which symbolizes rebellion, and is inscribed with text which reads September 20th, 2020. At this point, the protesters expressed their will that this country belongs to people after the historic plaque was aimed in the ground of Sanam Luang in front of the protesters' main stage. Mr. Parit, one of the core persons of the protest, read a statement of the Kanat Rasadon 2020, followed by the reading of the 10-point controversial manifesto on reform of the Thai monarchy by Ms. Panasaya or Kunrung. This is one of the big surprises in the morning. And after that, the second big surprise, which is the very, very claim that this will be the very, very big surprise of this protest. So the second big surprise have changed. The second big surprise, as they claim that is a very big surprise, is last night the protest leader told the public that they will be marching to the government house this morning. But everything is changed this morning because they changed the destination to the Privy Council's office to present the 10-point controversial of manifesto on reform of the Thai monarchy to the president of the Privy Council's office. Ms. Panasaya and her friend are the representative of the protest to go to give their demands to the representative of the Privy Council's office without any violence thing happened. After that, Mr. Parit Chiwarak told the public that if nothing happens about this Thai manifesto, they will come out again to protest again. And lastly, Mr. Parit asked for the gathering again of the protesters on September 24th this year at the government house, Kiekai, in order to observe the House of Representatives meeting. And this is what happened this morning.
Right, so thank you very much, Kun Kitipat. So that's the latest from our reporter on the scenes. Kun Kitipat was talking earlier about this one of the so-called surprises sprung by the protesters. That was the planting of a plaque at Sanam Luang. This is quite symbolic because Sanam Luang has been known as a place reserved for royal activities. Right?
Hence the name Sanam Luang.
That's why the name Sanam Luang. Luang means the official or royal, right?
Yes.
So, but the intention of the protester is to change the face of Sanam Luang. And now they are referring to Sanam Luang as a grounds for common people. So that's basically what the protester want the public to understand what the place is like now.
I think it's what the former Future Forward party leader was saying on his Facebook Live yesterday too, that he was trying to call the Sanam Luang to be Sanam Rat, which is also mean
People's Plaza.
Yes, People Plaza in that sense.
Yeah. All right, now let's go back to this early morning when the plaque was planted in a mock ceremony conducted by the protest leaders.
But
So-
they said they did a curse. The guy wearing white costume supposed to be the Brahmin
Yeah.
priest, and they said they make a curse of anyone who will dig up this plaque will meet with big disaster
That's
of
right.
some
So
sort.
It's sort of a mock ceremony, to plant the plaque there. So what is the meaning of this plaque? It's supposed to replicate a similar plaque planted at the Royal Plaza in the aftermath of the coup in 1932, which put an end to Thailand's absolute monarchy. But of course, this particular plaque planted this morning has a totally different message or inscription on it. It says something along this line. It says that at this very spot, we, the people, declare that this country is a possession of the people and not of the monarch. So basically, the plaque is meant to sort of portray Sanam Luang as a place where a new chapter of Thailand has been turned. Right.
What is the chance that it will be dig up?
Of course, there's always possibility that the authorities would intervene and have this the plaque removed. But as you just mentioned, that in the same mock ceremony, the self-proclaimed Brahmin put a curse on anyone who tries to remove the plaque, and misfortune to befall on them. So this kind of a symbolic activity but of course it sends a very strong message on the part of the protesters.
So to lay a plaque there is actually show that the protesters actually intended to go there since the first place. They didn't say at first that they're going to need to go there because they said if Thammasat University is too small for the crowd, then they will move. But it's obvious that they need to be there.
Yeah, I think looking back, we can say for sure that the protesters intended to have the rally at Sanam Luang in the first place, right? And Thammasat probably was a ruse. Making people believe that that is where the rally would take place. But as we all know that they did break into the Thammasat campus yesterday morning, but after having occupied the place for only a few hours, they left the campus and crossed over the street over to Sanam Luang.
Just feel like everything they have done, it's more symbolic than others, breaking the door, not breaking, but force themselves into the door of Thammasat University and lay down the plaque at Sanam Luang.
All right. Okay, now we have Associate Professor Dr. Jet Thonavanik of the Faculty of Law, the College of Asian Scholars, who has been keeping a close watch on the protests for weeks now. So, good morning, Dr. Jet.
Good morning.
I know you are busy driving.
Good morning,
I know you.
Yes, that's right. I'm
You have to be
just
okay.
somewhere around here.
Okay, I don't want to put your life in jeopardy, so be careful. All right. So, we can say that everything went well and ended well, right? Are you relieved that the whole thing ended peacefully?
Well, I think if we just look at the movement, actually it ended well. It went quite well. There were some of the unwanted actions. However, those unwanted actions were actually mild, not so violent. The breaking into Thammasat University, as people were expected from the beginning, it was thought that it would have been a real break-in, like slamming the door, the gate down, and all those other violent. But it just turned out that they were just cutting the change and they were just pushing the door and walk in, which is, well, actually, it didn't have to be like that because the small door, the side door of the gate was open, so they could just walk in. But I think it has to be symbolized somehow that this sort of symbolic happens. So that's fine. Yeah. But overall, especially this morning, I think that can be commended for the movements or the protesters and all these demonstrators, that they chose not to cause any harm and any violence. And in the end, they toned down their proposal to be submitted to the president of the Privy Council down to giving to the chief police and then ask the chief police to pass on, which I think that is something that has been out of the impoliteness and turned out to be more polite on their side.
I see.
So they said that they will come back on 14th of October. Do you think they will wait that long? Will there be anything that make them change their mind and come back earlier than that?
I think on this matter that they submit directly to His Majesty the King or to the institution, they might be waiting until 14th of October because I think we all know 14th of October, some years ago, some decades ago, what happened. So I think they will wait on that issue. But on the Constitution amendment, I don't think they will wait. I think they will just go around the 23rd, the 24th to the Parliament to ask for a submission of their proposal to the President of the Parliament.
Dr. Jet, of course, the so-called 10-point manifesto is nothing new. The protest leaders have been talking about this for weeks now, right? But how significant do you think it is that this demand is being made right in the heart of Bangkok and was relayed and submitted to the Privy Council?
Well, I think the protester might be consulting among themselves that if they want the action to really happen, they might have to do something that is non-violent and with some respect in terms of politeness, and therefore their demand can be submitted. And once their demands are accepted, it might be considered. Though not all the 10 points will be applicable, but some of the points that they made may be considered, and with some prudent considerations, some of those demands might be adapted into something that can be viable. So I think they have consulted with each other well enough that they now want the action to happen in terms in which is doable, not in terms in which it's only a symbolic or is something to be submitted without any action to be done.
So you think some of the demand might be met, like really it's gonna happen, or maybe it will change?
I think can be partially out of the 10 demands. I think some of the demands can be adopted and later on adapted and might be adjusted to be able to be in some of the constitutional provisions if they tone down their demands. So I think that's possible.
So you were talking about they're coming back on 24th or 25th. I think when people look at the protests, sometimes they forget that there are two issues. The constitutional amendment and also the reform of the monarchy institution. So right now they finished one of that goal, which is about the monarchy. And another one is the constitutional amendment. Is that what we have to look for next?
Well, I think the constitutional amendment on the 23rd or the 24th, they will come back to that. They will go to the parliament and they will ask for a proposal from them to be submitted. And I think they will demand for the constitutional drafting council or committee or something that must be done soon and soonest, within a month or something that they will have to see something going on. I think that's on the constitutional amendment. But I think on reform of the monarchy, I think that they will wait until the 14th of October. But when they are asking about reform of the monarchy, out of those 10 demands, to me, I don't think that's reform of the monarchy. And I don't think they should be talking about reform of the monarchy. They can talk about reform of democracy, having king as head of state under the constitution. and that will also be linked to constitutional amendment, and that take times, and that requires participation of all the public walks of life, and much more than just their demands, because many people are also opposing. Many people are not in agreement with all those demands, and many people are in agreement, however, not to the level in which they were proposing. So I think it needs time, and if they allow times to be had, and people can talk about this in a peaceful way, in an open dialogue, I think what they are demanding will be coupled with constitutional amendment, and that we will have democracy with king as head of state in a way in which Thai society has always been asked for.
So Dr. Jet, we all know how politically divided the Thai people have been over the past decade, right? So do you think the fact that the protesters are making demands on these very sensitive issues, of course it could have certainly have offended many people who still have strong loyalty to the monarchy. So how do you see this latest development in the way of further dividing the Thai people?
I think if they push for reform of the monarchy, or if they push some of the issues toward His Majesty the King himself, I think that will cause in the future some violence. And I think it might instigate some of the opposition, and that may grow into some counter rally, some counter demonstration, and that might cause some of the people to move out strongly and more strongly, and there may be confrontation between people who are in opposition against each other. So I don't think that will be fruitful. But if they are looking at the reform of democracy, which of course we all know that we still have problems with our democracy, but that democracy must be democracy with the king as head of state, but under the constitution. So the focus will still be under the constitution. And as I said over and over, that for me, chapter 1, chapter 2 on the general issues on the institution can be talked about and can be discussed, but in a polite, respectful way and with reasonable rationale that can be made. So in that sense, if they come down to that level, to the level that they said they dream to have such democracy, I think that's fine. But if they push for monarchy reform, if they push towards something that His Majesty the King must be doing himself, I don't think that's going to cause any development to this country.
So what are you saying that in practice, this is actually not a request for monarchy reform, it's actually a request to reform the system of constitutional monarchy?
Well, the way in which they submit the proposal sounds like they are hitting upon the monarchy and His Majesty, not upon democracy. If they are hitting upon democracy, they can go to the parliament, talk about this with the parliamentarians, because those people are the ones who are the representatives of this country. Whether or not you like the senators, they are another part of representations of this country. So in that parliament, consisting of both people who work as the senator, people who work as the House member, and as well as the government. So you propose there, those people are the representatives, and we can reform our democracy through our representatives. And plus the participation of the people that can be embedded in all these actions, that's fine. But when they target the monarchy, when they target His Majesty the King, I don't think that's well of a reform. That's more of a hit and run for something that will not be developmental for Thailand.
Okay, then thank you very much, Dr. Jet.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, so.
Have a safe drive.
Okay.
All right, so I think
Thank you.
the bottom line, according to Dr. Jet, is that the issue of monarchy is something that can be and should be debated, but within the framework of reforming the political system,
Right.
but shouldn't be seen as a direct attack on the monarchy or the monarch himself or itself.
I think a lot of people feel turned off. I think I can use the word turned off because as soon as they hear the word monarchy or royal, they don't hear anything else.
Okay, right. So we still haven't heard any reaction from the so-called royalist camp on the opposite side. So maybe today, I'm sure that there will be a lot of statements or remarks from these people. Now let's take another look at the 10-point manifesto that has been the centerpiece of the whole anti-government demonstrations. So we take a look at each of the points carefully. Of course, the first and most famous point of the demand is the call for the House of Representatives to have the power to hold the monarch accountable for his conduct. Mm-hmm. Because under the present constitution, the king, the monarchy is above scrutiny. So this is what the protesters want, that the monarch be held accountable through the legislative process.
The next one is to abrogate the Article 112 of the Penal Code, which we will call lèse majesty law.
Yeah. So and this is very important because it's something that has been sort of a centerpiece of the pro-democracy movement all along, because they've seen this particular article as being very draconian in the sense that it has been allegedly used as a political tool to silence opponents of the powers that be.
But there's some people said that it doesn't need to be abrogated altogether.
Yeah.
It can be just amended and make it update to make it really practical to be used nowadays.
And it's worth noting that Prime Minister Prayut has been insisting that His Majesty the King has made it known that he doesn't have any intention to have anyone prosecuted under this article. And if we take a careful look at all the legal cases recently, none of those who have come out to criticize the monarch or the monarchy has been charged under this article. So that's exactly the message that Prime Minister has been sending, that don't try to fault the monarchy for this particular piece of law has been implemented, because His Majesty has no intention of seeing anyone prosecuted with this article.
But I think for a lot of people, as long as it's there, it's there for them to criticize and it's there for them to talk about.
That's right. And then the third point is the call for a clear division of the crown property and personal property of the monarch. This is another major issue that certainly will raise a lot of debate. And then this particular demand has also triggered a lot of counter debate.
To reduce the state budget for the monarchy?
Yes, right. And of course, the critics of the monarch believe that too much money has been spent on the monarchy, so they want to see a reduction in the budget for that.
The next one is to abrogate the monarch's personal agencies, including the Privy Council.
And this is also quite interesting to note that the protesters are calling for an abrogation of the Privy Council, among other things. But this morning they did submit the 10-point demand with the Privy Council.
So can we say that Privy Council, for a lot of people, it's more like a political institute?
That's right. But in fact, the role of the Privy Council is basically to propose advice to His Majesty. And the appointment of the members of the council is up to the King prerogative. And of course, in fact, it hasn't really been seen as playing any political role. But of course, critics of the monarchy would see this Privy Council as being redundant, and there's no need for this kind of personal advisor to the king anymore. So,
and the next one is they ask to end all royal charity. Is that possible?
And of course, the counter argument is that the people do contribute to royal charity out of personal affection for the monarchy, right? And they know that the money would be well spent for charity purposes, so they have no grievances about this. But of course, the critics of the monarchy see this as a sign of sort of obedience by certain groups of people in exchange for certain privileges. And of course, this kind of accusation has been consistently denied by the people in power that there has not been any clear examples or proof of this kind of quid pro quos that
Right.
you give money to royal charity and then you get something in return.
But in the royal charity doesn't mean that thing gonna go away.
No. As long as people still have confidence, have faith and in the monarchy, then you cannot stop people from contributing the assets or money to the royal charity. Right?
The next one is no public opinions on political issues by the monarch. But currently, officially, there has never been a public opinions on political by the monarch anyway, right?
No, we haven't seen or heard any comments on political issues by the monarch in years.
Yes.
But of course, this is another issue of major debate. All right, and then the protesters also want to see an end to what they call glorification of the monarchy, because they believe that all the positive reports on activities of the monarchy have been too one-sided.
Right.
But of course, the supporters, loyalists believe that all the good news or positive news about the monarchy are not sort of fabricated or intended to glorify the monarchy, but they certainly reflect the activities of the monarchy, activities that benefit the society.
But if we look at other countries that also has the monarchy, like in European country or even Japan, they have the same thing. They have news that give out information about what the royal family has been doing or where they are.
And in the eyes of many observers, this particular demand, the investigation into deaths of critics of the monarchy, is least sensible, because there has never been proofs or any believable evidence that the two things could be linked. Criticizing the monarchy and then disappearance or deaths of people who are critics of the monarchy. So this one thing, this particular demand has been certainly hotly debated.
And the next one is the monarch will not endorse any more military coup. When the monarch endorsed the military coup, is that more like a procedural thing, or it's what they have to do?
No, yeah, but in the eyes of the critics of the monarchy, especially the protesters, the signing of approval for any coup d'etat is practically an endorsement of this kind of illegal or unconstitutional action.
But in the past, has there ever been any event that there will not be an endorsement to the coup? It always has been endorsed, right?
That's right, because first of all, the coup makers need to have themselves absolved for any wrongdoings constitutionally. So the only person who can do that is the monarch. So that's why the critics claim that as long as the monarch continues to endorse military coup d'etats, there will not this vicious circle of coup d'etats, elections, democracy cannot be ended.
I have a question though. Does the monarch really have the liberty to say no to endorse the coup?
I think that's a big question that certainly needs to be debated and within the historical context. All right, so these are basically the essence of the 10-point demands by the protester, which was submitted supposedly to the president of the Privy Council, General Surayut Julanont, but it was submitted through the Metropolitan Police Chief. And the person who read out this 10-point manifesto this morning was none other than Parit Chiwarak, who is better known as Penguin, his nickname, right? And Penguin has been promoting this 10-point manifesto at all the rallies he has been attending in the past few weeks. But this morning was the first time that this 10-point demand was read out publicly at a major anti-government rally right in the middle, in the heart of Bangkok. So this is the big difference. And this was supposed to be part of the so-called super big surprise, as promised by Parit and other protest leaders. So who is Parit?
Parit, he is the actually student activist that is very outspoken about the sensitive issues in Thailand, which is the issues involve the monarchy.
That's right.
He admit himself that this is a very, very sensitive issues, but he said that since he already started saying this, there is no turning back.
That's right. No, there's no doubt that Parit is the biggest magnet for all the rallies held by the students in the past few weeks. And of course, he one of the most visible faces of the students' movement. And he has one unmistakable message, that is to reform the monarchy. And of course, as expected, he did highlight the issue at this morning's rally. And he described his push for the reform of the monarchy as having raised the anti-government protest to a new level. He said, we have lifted the ceiling and there's no lowering it now. That's how he described the fight, to have the monarchy reformed.
Parit is only 22 years old. And he has become attention to the media when he was just 16. He was right in front of the Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha in 2015, 1 year after the coup, and he was questioning about how Thai children could be insulated from corruption.
Now, if you listen carefully to what he has been saying, you have to admit that he is quite well informed and he does his homework quite well. And he is certainly a historic geek. He knows everything about Thai history. You cannot argue with him on Thai history. And when he takes to the stage and talk about Thai history, the monarchy, then he can be very, very detailed about things that happened in the past and have every point that he raised supported by historical facts.
Before the protest happened at ThaiPBS, we have a session briefing by the expert in politics, Dr. Kanokrat Lerchuskun, and she actually talked to all these protest leaders, and she said Penguin is a very, very smart person, very clever, and he knows the history, and she actually said no one can win the debate about history with Parit.
All right, and now he has become the face of the student protest. All right, so that's how the 2 days rally is ending, right? So the students, joined by the people from different walks of life, have made their voice heard. They delivered the message, and they left the government with some homework, and they will come back again in October.
But according to Dr. Jet, we might see them again in next several days before the weekend about the constitutional amendment.
That's right. October 14th, the date in which the student will come back, also has some symbolic significance, because October 14, as we all remember, in 1973 was the day that students rose up against symmetry, against the Thai government. And it became known as the October 14 Uprising, and which eventually brought down the Thai government. So, and yesterday, September the 19th, also has some significance, history speaking, because it marks the 14th anniversary of the military coup d'etat that brought down the Thaksin government. So, every date that the students choose to hold rallies or to have some activities usually have historical meanings.
It's not just some random.
That's right.
They really planned it.
All right, so that's all for this morning, and we have been reporting this since yesterday morning.
Friday, actually.
Friday, yeah, that's a Friday night, and we are glad that everything have ended, at least for the time being anyway, peacefully, with no violence then. So thank you very much for watching. Kun Tulip and I say goodbye for now. See you later then. Thank you.
สวัสดีค่ะ